Chapter 3. Gone Fishing. When she got back to the shore, Wade was out in the water, with the tip of his snout submerged. He was fishing. The Ilosuchus carcass was so desiccated it was almost torn in half. It seemed that Wade was done with it. There was not all that much left on it, but that didn't matter to Crystal. Free meat was meat she didn't have to burn energy for. She dug in, ripping off large chunks of croc before gulping it down. She watched Wade as he fished. Spinosaurus was mainly ichthyophagus, or a fish eater. There were plenty of options to choose from. There was the hypodontid shark Tribotus. Wade enjoyed them, but they were not his preference. His favorite was the sawfish relative Onchopristis. At 25 feet, they were far larger than any sawfish living today. The barbed rostrum of one could reach over 7 feet. That was likely the cause of many of Wade's scars around his snout. There is evidence of Spinosaurus teeth being found with the fossils of Onchopristis. There was also a Spinosaurus jaw discovered that had a partial Onchopristis barb embedded in it. Wade suddenly snapped something up in his jaws. It was a giant 9-foot-long Bichir relative called Bawidius. Wade was able to pull this hunting strategy off due to a fascinating adaptation. When a Spinosaurus's jaw was put through a CT scan, it was found that there were pits in the snout. These were pressure sensors similar to those of crocodiles. His nostrils were also set higher on his skull than Crystal's were, which meant he could detect his lunch swimming about without even having to look. The Bawidius thrashed about in a desperate attempt to slip free. However, Wade's conical teeth meant once he had his prize, there was not much that the prey could do. Wade made his way over to the shore, still paying the feasting Crystal no mind at all. He dropped the Bawidius onto the shore and planted a massive foot onto the fish. Using his good arm, he bisected the unfortunate Bawidius with a massive 13-inch claw. With his food cut into a more manageable fillet, Wade gulped down each half of the Bawidius, one right after the other. He then waded back out to wait for more sushi to swim into his clutches. Crystal didn't understand why, but this somewhat intrigued her. It was so bizarre to her. She knew that Wade would not be an issue as long as she kept a healthy and respectful distance from him. The Ilosuchus wasn't her usual food, but you can't afford to be picky. When she looked up from her meal again, Wade had his favorite food, an Onchopristis clamped in his jaws. This one, which he had also locked onto with his good arm, appeared to be longer than Crystal at 25 feet. Such a prize was a difficult one to haul ashore, but Wade seemed determined to turn the sawfish into a nice fillet. The Onchopristis thrashed about, its barbed rostrum flailing about wildly. As Wade brought his prize ashore, the Onchopristis swung its rostrum again. It slammed into Wade's leg, and he hissed in pain as its massive barbs dug into his flesh. He turned and pinned the Onchopristis with his foot. He then stabbed the sawfish in the brain with a massive claw, and then began to rake his claws all over it, and the sawfish stopped thrashing fairly quickly. He then began to tear into the Onchopristis and swallow down the tasty fillet slices. Crystal could see a small amount of blood starting to trickle out of the punctures in Wade's thigh. It definitely looked quite painful. As Crystal picked the last bits of flesh off of the Ilosuchus carcass, a crack of thunder rang out. She jumped, startled by the loud noise as it began to rain. Wade looked up at the sky, grunted, and began to drag his kill into the brush. Crystal followed suit, eager to get out of the rain. By the time she had ducked into the forest, it had become a downpour. She was always wary during a monsoon season. She needed to put a good amount of distance between her and the river. She delved deeper and deeper into the forest. Water dripped down her muzzle and slid off her back. The rain was not as intense with the trees to break it up and slow it down. All around her, creatures ducked for cover to try and shield themselves from the unrelenting downpour. She continued to soldier on until she found a thicket of undergrowth. She tried her best to shield herself from the rain and closed her eyes. She listened to the sounds of the rain as she slowly drifted off.